Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that still, to this day, has recurring dreams. They're so good. Of visiting the Delias outlet in Reading, Pennsylvania. Seriously, I think it's a treat that my brain gives me when I've been having a particularly hard day. It turns out, some people, their happy place is the beach or maybe swimming with dolphins or looking at whales. Why am I going aquatic here? I have no idea. But anyway, it turns out my secret happy place is the Delias outlet. It says a lot about me, I'm sure. I'm your host, Amanda, and apparently I think a lot about Delias and the ocean, and this is episode 147. My friend Jess, who is so rad, is back to discuss more catalogs. We'll cover the story of Lillian Vernon. It's more than just embroidery. We'll dig into the catalogs of our tween and teen years. There's Delias and Alloy, Moxie Girl, Girlfriends LA, so many more. Jess will tell us the story of the time she visited the Delias offices, which I am so jealous of. And because hindsight is always 2020, right? That's how it goes. We'll lay out where these catalogs went wrong, while they also succeeded in framing out this idea of brand and lifestyle for millennials and millennial-focused brands in the 21st century. They actually, even though most of these catalogs are no longer with us, they really set up so many brands of this century. We're going to talk all about that. But before we jump into that, let's listen to some audio essays from small business owners in our community. Today, we're going to meet Natalie of Yellow Clover Vintage and Marianna of Luneta Creations. Let's give them a listen.
Hi, my name is Natalie, and I'm the owner of Yellow Clover Vintage, an Instagram-based vintage kids clothing shop. You can find us at Yellow Clover Vintage on Instagram. It all started because I couldn't stop buying kids' clothes. My husband and I had 3 sons through adoption, and we were waiting for our 4th, a girl. I had seen how our sons destroyed most of their clothes, like knees torn open, pen drawings on the thighs, cut sleeves when they wanted a tank top, so I'd stopped buying new kids' clothes. The adoption wait can be long, and thrifting became my form of nesting while we waited to welcome our daughter. There was, and still is, something so therapeutic about flipping through racks and wandering aisles. It's the perfect introvert's pastime, which is what I am. I could feel the quality difference in a lot of the clothing. Most of the best stuff was vintage. Besides the quality, the colors, patterns, and quirky designs were my thing. I'm just not a neutrals kind of person. I started accumulating a little stash for our daughter, but I could not pass up a good piece of kids' vintage clothing. I started selling them on Facebook and found a little community of other moms buying and selling vintage kids' clothes. A friend encouraged me to make an Instagram shop, so I did. As soon as I did, I realized that there were parents all over the U.S. and even in other countries who wanted to buy the things I was finding. Soon, I expanded to Shopify too. I found so many other parents who like vintage kids' clothes for reasons that I do. The quality is higher than the fast fashion clothes being made today. The details are just a lot cuter too, like shirts with huge graphics and rompers with little moving parts. One of my favorites is a vintage ant farm t-shirt with a clear vinyl piece sewn on the front with little plastic ants inside. It feels really good to know we're playing our small part in eliminating some of the waste that comes from kids' clothes. Kids grow so quickly, and they ruin so much. There was a huge nostalgia factor, too. I had a great childhood, and it's been fun to relive some of it through finding clothes I know my brothers and I wore, or a Beauty and the Beast t-shirt, because I did believe I was the most like Belle when I was younger. As a parent, my small business is a part of my self-care and sanity, too. It has been such a good creative outlet for me. I've always had an interest in design, so getting to show people these awesome colors and prints with a nice photo is fun for me. Of course, I like being able to contribute an income to our family, too. It's nice to think I paid for this trip or I paid for these music lessons for my kids. I love the relationships I've formed with other parents. It makes me so happy to see kids wearing clothing I found, washed, and restored for their birthdays or holidays. though relationships with my customers have grown in our commonality as parents. We talk about school and sleep and Bluey and the things that matter most to us. So what started as a hobby to clothe my own kids has turned into clothing kids in multiple states and countries. It brings me a lot of joy, and I know it brings other parents joy too. So again, my name is Natalie, and my shop is Yellow Clover Vintage. You can find us on Instagram at Yellow Clover Vintage.
Hi, Amanda and fellow Clotheshorse listeners. My name is Marianna, and I'm obsessed with Clotheshorse. It's basically the only podcast I listen to. I apologize in advance if anything that I pronounce is not correct, because I'm Brazilian, so English is not my first language. But I hope you can understand me. I'm calling in regards to Amanda's prompt about story and feelings about owning a small business. I'm the owner of a reworked vintage jewelry brand called Luneta Creations. I basically source vintage beaded necklaces, take them apart, and then I remake them into new original designs. And I've had the brand for a bit over 2 years. It started as a side hustle during lockdown, and what prompted it was actually that a friend of mine sent me a picture of a bottle of wine that had my nickname on it, in cursive, and the font reminded me of the business cards I had my dad print out for me when I was 8 and owned my first jewelry business. This would have been in the year 2000, so it was mostly seaweed necklaces and elastic bracelets that I would force my classmates to buy from me during recess. Maybe not force, but I would ask them very nicely. And I don't know, when the wine label reminded me of that, I immediately started thinking about starting a jewelry brand again. And I was so excited that I couldn't even sleep thinking about what I would make and my branding. And as I love vintage, and I know it's the best for the environment, I decided to go through this route of sourcing vintage necklaces and taking them apart for materials. And sometimes I'm lucky to find vintage deadstock beads as well. When I started Luneta, I had been working at Amazon for about 6 years. I was hired as an intern there back in 2014 while I was still in uni in Brazil. I was majoring in economics, even though none of the jobs I've had at Amazon had anything to do with that. They transferred me to their UK office back in 2017, so I've actually been living in London since then. I don't want to go too deep into it, but even though I feel lucky that I got to keep my day job at Amazon during COVID. During my whole time there, which was almost 8 years, I never felt like I could be myself. So when I started Luneta in 2020, I really felt like it was the first time that I could just be myself and not have to pretend like to be like a corporate persona. It was so freeing. Then in July 2021, I actually changed teams at Amazon because I was hoping that maybe it would make things better. But the team I moved to was really crazy in terms of work-life balance. And then I eventually burnt out and decided to quit Amazon in December last year. And I wish I could say that I quit my job because Luneta was so successful that I just could. But I'm actually just lucky that I have enough money saved, at least for now, and being able to make do when my sales aren't enough to make my rent and bills. And even though I make less money than I did while I was in corporate, I'm really passionate about what I'm doing with Luneta. And to be honest, the thought of having to go back to the corporate world gives me a huge amount of anxiety. So I'm doing my best to make Luneta work out, including taking some lessons from your small business big picture course. In terms of lessons learned, the first thing that I did not think about before I started Luneta is that how lonely it is to have your own business when you do everything yourself. I never thought I would miss speaking to people because, I don't know, having meetings was like the worst part of my day, but I actually do. So I think it's really important to find a community that you can talk about your business and, brainstorm, etc. I also learned that sometimes you just have to push through the embarrassment to start your own business. When I started Luneta, I kept thinking, like, why would anyone buy anything from me? I majored in economics. I've never had a creative job. Who am I to try and sell things? But with time, I've been trying to feel more entitled to making a living based on my values, because this is just what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to become a millionaire or, grow Luneta indefinitely. I just want to be able to pay my bills and maybe go traveling sometimes. The third thing that I'm still trying to get my head around is how to make a sustainable business more scalable. Because I use vintage beads, I can only make 1 or 2 of my designs most of the time. So not only are the vintage beads more expensive compared to contemporary beads, but also the process of finding them and then cleaning them and then taking them apart is a little more time consuming. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure that one out. That's it from me. I'm looking forward to listening to all your old episodes. At the moment, I am at Capitalism Month in 2021, which has been super interesting. I'm Marianna from lunetacreations.com or at Luneta Creations on Instagram. That's Luneta Creations. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you to both Natalie and Marianna for taking the time to share their stories with us. I loved listening to them. And now I want the adult version of that ant farm shirt that Natalie was describing. Doesn't it sound so good? I will be sharing Natalie and Marianna's websites and Instagram profiles in the show notes. So please go give them a follow. Marianna touched on something that I want to talk about here, and it's something that I've actually been having a lot of conversations about recently, and that's the challenge of getting customers to be okay with paying a fair price for the items she offers. She said, quote, "Why would anyone buy anything from me?" We're going to come back to that multiple times in this conversation because this is something we have been talking about a lot in this round of the small business classes I teach with Courtney of Sonic Wave Vintage. That is Small Biz Big Pick, which Marianna has taken a few classes this term. And actually, Natalie is in the classes right now. Everyone in this round, and to be honest, probably every small business owner ever struggles with paying themselves a living wage and charging the right prices to make that happen. It is the question I answer most frequently with clients, with friends, and definitely with students in Small Biz Big Pick. I will agree that a lot of customers, or at least people having a bad day on Instagram, will be price resistant at times. Not because they're horrible, selfish people, but because they don't understand. They really don't understand why things should cost more if the people making, selling, shipping, and delivering those items are going to be paid a living wage. As we've talked about many, many times here on Clotheshorse, fast fashion, and really the fast fashionization of everything, literally everything you can buy, has really distorted our sense of value and price. You and I both know that a tank top should cost more than $1.90. But we know that because we have the knowledge, right? We understand the big picture. We have seen the data. We've heard the stories. The average customer probably doesn't have that knowledge. And as much as it feels like a burden, an unfair burden for sure, it's kind of on us as small business owners to share that knowledge. I call it, and yes, this is gross, showing how the sausage is made. Show why your beads are special and more expensive. Explain the time required to make something you sell. Most people don't even understand. They have no idea how much time is involved in making a necklace or a shirt or pouring candles or all of the other things you do. If you're a secondhand seller, emphasize the amount of time you're saving someone by bringing these clean, mended items right to the door. How do you share that knowledge? You show it on social media. You tell these stories via the emails you send your customers. You talk about it with other business owners. You talk about it in Instagram Lives. You share it in your stories. You show the work you're doing. Yeah, do we ask Amazon to show us the work? Do we ask Zara how much time it takes to make that dress? No, but unfortunately, this is where we are because these companies have made pricing so disconnected from the actual time, materials, and value of the things they sell that unfortunately it's on us to undo that misconception, that disconnect, by telling the truth, by showing our truth, by detailing the work that goes into the things that we do, and by explaining what it is to pay yourself a living wage and why it matters. No one wants you to not pay yourself a living wage. They just don't see how the pieces connect together. And it's on us to show that. I mean, that's definitely something I'm shouting about every day, I feel like, to anyone who will listen. We all need to do that so more people hear us, because only a few people hear me, right? Maybe only a few people hear you. Only a few people hear some other people in your life. But if we are all talking about it, then everybody hears it eventually, right? But that's not the end of it, right? Because I think there's something a little bit more insidious involved in why it's so hard to charge the right price, okay? Let's go back to what Marianna said in her audio essay again. Why would anyone buy something for me? I can list many reasons why someone should buy something from Marianna. I was looking at her jewelry today and it is beautiful. I want every single piece. Lots of stunning pastel beads, and I love knowing that they are vintage. Like, it's some of the best jewelry I've seen in a long time, and I think it has incredible value. It's definitely worth paying a higher price, right? She's definitely talented. I mean, she's been making jewelry since she was a kid. Like, that's real experience. There is no reason why anyone should hesitate to pay the real value of this jewelry, nor should Marianna hesitate in charging that real, accurate, fair price, right? What this really is, that question, why would anyone buy something from me, is imposter syndrome. And I know this is something that's kind of trendily thrown out there on social media in meme format, but let's just talk about it a little bit more, okay? Because I see it coming up over and over again in the small business world. Wikipedia defines imposter syndrome as a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Imposter syndrome is often accompanied by anxiety and depression, and then even more anxiety. And it manifests itself in a lot of behaviors that you might catch yourself doing every day. Like, is making a single mistake the most terrifying thing you can imagine, specifically making it publicly? Do you get kind of stuck in ensuring that everything is perfect, and that's perfect in quotes, before making a move? That's imposter syndrome. Are you afraid that people won't like your Instagram posts, or they'll be super critical at the very least? Is this preventing you from posting on your business account or even on your personal account? That's imposter syndrome right there too. And I'll be the first to admit that I have a lot of anxiety every single time I post something on the Clotheshorse Instagram. Every time. I've been doing this for years now. And I kind of like hold my breath and I can feel my heart racing, asking myself, how will this go wrong? The human brain was not built for the steady stream of feedback from strangers that social media gives us. I don't love it. But I have also experienced some of the worst things that social media can bring you. That was like death threats from vegans who found my phone number on the internet. That was because I posted about fake leather being plastic. People criticizing my body and appearance, really the last thing that I need at this point. I've been accused of being a clueless, privileged white woman because of my stance on secondhand shopping. I could go on and on. I have definitely had to take breaks. I've had to turn off comments. I've had to turn off DMs. I've had to skip out on social media for periods of time, for sure. But you know what? That doesn't mean that no one wants to see my content on Instagram. It doesn't mean that my content isn't good enough and that I should be ashamed of it or anxious about it. And I would say the same for you if the anxiety that you aren't good enough is holding you back. And I will say in a lot of the conversations I have, it is the anxiety of not being good enough that is preventing people from posting about their business or showing their work or showing the work, how the sausage is made that I was talking about earlier, right? It's the fear of people not thinking it's still worthwhile. And right there, that's imposter syndrome. Does the thought of asking for someone for help or advice completely freak you out because you know You'll be unmasking yourself as an incompetent imposter. I want you to know that, yeah, that's imposter syndrome right there. But everyone needs help and advice. Geez, like even like CEOs of companies, not that I'm like, glorifying them here, but like people who make a lot of big decisions, leaders of nations, right? They have advisors, right? Because they need other people. They need advice. They need expertise. They need to just talk about things with other people. Everybody needs help and advice. That is kind of like one of the hardest parts, I think, about small business ownership, which Marianna touched on. Like I, even as a podcaster, I don't interact with a lot of other podcasters because, I'm kind of like busy podcasting. And I'm sure a lot of you are like really busy trying to like live your day-to-day life and run your business. But I do think there's something to be said for networking, which I hate that word, but connecting, let's say that instead, building relationships with other small business owners in your community, because you can talk about these things and you can share best practices and get advice, or even vent about a situation that has you in a quandary. Like maybe it's a really difficult customer or something that was happening on Instagram. Honestly, I used to take all of the really intense feedback, negative feedback I would get on Instagram so personally, as like it was my fault that I was the problem. And if I couldn't get it together, then I didn't deserve to be on Instagram, something like that. That's the kind of stuff my brain does all the time. And I started talking to my other friends who, their businesses relied on social media, and wow, like they were experiencing the same sort of things. And it was really validating and actually helped me feel like less of an imposter, a mess up, by hearing that they were facing the same situations. I mean, that doesn't make it great that people are jerks on social media, but it did help me feel like less that the problem was me and my incompetence, right? Once again, everyone needs help and advice. And sometimes it's just as simple as having a conversation with someone who shares a similar business or life as you. I ask you this: who is the person you admire most in the world? I'll give you a minute. Maybe this person is your role model. Think about it. I can assure you that they have asked many people for help, advice, guidance. They've even just vented at them over the years. We all need that. That is what it is to be human. Are you working ridiculous hours trying to work harder than everyone else? Oh man, this is one I know very well. Really doubling down on hustle culture because you want to prove that you deserve success? Nope, that's not good either. That's imposter syndrome. You do not need to burn yourself out working 24 hours a day, working harder than everyone else to prove that you belong here. You do belong here. Are you afraid of applying for markets or offering wholesale because you assume no one will want your stuff? I bet you're totally wrong. Have you asked others their opinion on this? Like people you trust who are close to you? I don't think you should look to the opinions of others to feel better about your work, but it can be a start to just like putting it in perspective. And I think that often what happens, especially when you're a small business owner, when you're working on your own all the time, right? Like you don't interact with a lot of other peers as much. And then you're on social media where you see the most perfect version of everything everyone's doing, right? It took them 50 tries to get the right photo, but your brain doesn't process it that way. So you're being left alone with your thoughts. You're only seeing the most idealized version of everybody's work out there. You start to get this skewed idea of what is good and what is not. And then, of course, your brain goes to the stuff I'm doing is in the not good category. So I definitely catch myself kind of self-sabotaging myself all the time with imposter syndrome, especially when it comes to this idea of like perfection or everything being better than what I'm doing. I have my own approach that helps me a lot, and take this with a grain of salt because I'm not a therapist at all, but I am someone who has dealt with imposter syndrome my whole life, and I have found that this exercise really helps me put things in perspective. So you might want to try this. I'm betting you have a vision of the perfect version of the thing you are doing, the thing that when compared to what you're doing always makes your thing less good, less worthy of a fair price, less worthy of being in markets, less good, right? This version that is in your mind is millions of miles beyond what you're doing. That you've come to accept that as fact, a fact that you repeat to yourself. And so I'll tell you this, it's not a fact, but you repeated it so many times to yourself that it became a fact. It's the version of your work that will always garner a fair price when you feel too afraid to ask for it yourself, right? It will be accepted in every market with like a red carpet rolled out for the seller. It'll get 1 million likes on social media while you're only going to get 15 or whatever it is you're imagining. You have that vision of that in your head. And maybe it's a particular business, a particular product. I don't know. Theoretically, it's something you saw before and it's stuck with you all this time. But our memories play tricks on us, right? And sometimes, frequently, the way we remember something is not what it really was, right? In this kind of case, this like perfect, most ideal version of what you do that you've ever seen is probably a more fantastical version than reality. So, I'll ask myself, like, what is the best version of what I'm doing that someone else is doing? For example, it would be like, what's the best podcast I can think of? Who's making the best Instagram educational content? For Marianna, it would mean finding the best jewelry made of vintage beads. Now go give it a look or listen, like really look at it, really study it. Why is it so much better than what you're doing? Or is it really so much better at all? I think we tend to build up the perfect versions into something larger than life, something completely unachievable that even the original version did not achieve what we've imagined in our minds over time. And all this does is make our work seem worse, less worthy of customers or listeners or appreciators. We're doing ourselves a major disservice by holding on to this idealized version of something that doesn't exist. And I think examining, comparing, looking at it in real life can really help you get some perspective and realize that actually you're doing a great job. I also think many of us have been conditioned to feel shame and pride, that it's a bad look to be happy with our work. I mean, Dustin and I were talking the other day about how there was a time, in our like late teens, early 20s where it was shameful to be, quote, trying too hard. So when Dustin would play a show, he would make sure he wasn't like doing too good of a job playing guitar, making things too perfect, because he didn't want people to think he like cared that much. And I definitely remember that with like things I would write and even the way I would get dressed. I would be like, it needs to be a little bit off so no one thinks I'm trying too hard or I'm high maintenance. And I think in general, hopefully we're all getting over this, like, don't try too hard thing. I hope that that's something that's like left in the 90s and the early aughts. It's like such a gross hipster thing. But I think a lot of us at the same time have been conditioned to feel that shame of being proud of ourselves or being happy with our work. Like we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to be proud of what we have done, what we're currently doing, what we'll do next. We're always supposed to feel a little bit bad about it. Unfortunately, discouraging people from being happy with their accomplishments just swings the pendulum even harder into imposter syndrome. I see imposter syndrome playing itself out in so many bad ways as we undersell ourselves in many, many different aspects of our lives. Not asking for raises and paid time off at work because we think we're unworthy. Not charging fair prices for the things we sell because we think we are unworthy. Staying stuck in toxic relationships, both romantic and platonic, because we think we are unworthy. Depriving ourselves of rest and reward because guess what? We think we are unworthy. Neglecting our health because we think we are unworthy of caring for ourselves or being cared for. There's no easy cure for imposter syndrome. And from my experience, it creeps back into my life anytime I'm in a new situation, whether that's a new job, a new project, a new place, a party where I don't even know anyone, you name it. If I'm uncomfortable, my imposter syndrome comes back in full force. Obviously, therapy is the ideal way to work through this, but therapy, at least here in the United States, is a massive luxury that many of us don't get to have. I think talking about your own imposter syndrome with close friends is super helpful. Even asking them to call you out when you're saying or doing something that is clearly the result of imposter syndrome, I think that can be really, really helpful, because I do think, and I hope this doesn't sound like too new agey, manifesting, that kind of thing. I think when we hear ourselves say something out loud that is very critical of us, our work, that kind of creates this feedback loop where we believe it as reality. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that if you've questioned the quality of your work long enough, you've repeated it to yourself so many times, it becomes a fact. And I think that is a big part of being called out when we say that stuff out loud. Because if someone says, no, you're wrong, it stops that feedback loop and it interrupts its chance to become fact in your brain. There are many, many articles, books, videos, etc. about this topic. I recommend checking them out, finding the right thing for you. Sometimes we have to expose ourselves to a lot of information before we find the truth for ourselves, the thing that works best for us. I cannot recommend this highly enough. I suggest distancing yourself from people who stoke your imposter syndrome by being overly critical of you, who tell you to settle for less because you are not worthy of better, who neg you first before offering a tepid compliment. We've all had people like that in our lives. I have noticed how certain people time and time again exacerbated my sense of imposterism, and distancing myself from that has helped me so much. Okay, that's a lot of therapy from someone who is not a therapist. So I guess we will finish this installment of the Clotheshorse Therapy Corner, trademark pending. So let's totally shift gears and let's jump back into my conversation with Jess about catalogs. This is another one where I was like, oh, we'll probably talk about this for 1 minute. And then I started reading and I couldn't stop. That was Lillian Vernon.
Oh, yes. We talked about Lillian Vernon a bit.
So, I think of Lillian Vernon as a place you buy things that are embroidered with your name on it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's a doll or a robe or, anything. It's just like they put names on things. Mm-hmm. So I started, this was like the last thing I was reading about last night. And I was like, okay, I need to go to bed soon. This is getting too ridiculous. But Lillian Vernon was started by Lillian Menashe in 1951 when she was 24 years old.
Oh, go get it.
I know.
Lillian.
She was newly married and pregnant, and she used $2,000 of her wedding money to start the business, which began by placing advertisements in 17 magazine for personalized purses and belts. They were like $1.99 for the belt, $2.99 for the purse, and they would have your name embroidered on them.
I am so impressed because you were so spot on.
I know.
Knew where they came. You knew where the origin story, just from glancing at the catalog.
Right. It was like, I was like, wow, this is like the only catalog story that we're telling that you're like, yeah, it all adds up, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
So this was so wildly successful that her first round of ads generated $32,000 in sales, which is more than $365,000 in today's money. She turned a major profit. And so, that was her thing, right? Personalized stuff. And at that time, in the early days of Lillian Vernon, it was primarily marketed towards young women, hence the ad in 17. And it, they increased the range a little bit to young married women as too. And it really became an iconic catalog for women in the 50s and 60s. Over time, it shifted focus and expanded to sell to older women as its customers grew older, to homemakers, mothers, definitely grandmas now, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's definitely like grandma vibes.
Yeah,
Yes.
like by the time we were kids, it was our grandmas who had like grown up with this catalog, basically.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the catalog moved with them,
yes.
through time. Yeah.
So the Lillian Vernon Corporation was founded in 1965 after she'd been in business for 14 years. And it went public in 1987. It was the first company to be founded by a woman to be publicly traded on the American Stock Exchange.
What? Like, why don't we know that? Like, why didn't I?
Why
know
are we
already?
not celebrating Lillian Menashe all the times? I know.
I'm like a little disappointed in myself for not.
Me
knowing
too.
that.
Me too. So then this is when I was like, oh my God, I need to go to bed soon. Like, why am I doing this? Well, then I stumbled upon her obituary in the New York Times. I want to say it was from 2015, around that time.
Oh, okay.
Here's what the New York Times had to say. Ms. Vernon had what she called a golden gut for knowing what women wanted, often even before they knew. Her products were as diverse as rescued shards of Ming vases. I have no idea what that means. That she fashioned into pendants and bracelets. And, of course, her signature all-pink lady toolkit, complete with hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, and sometimes a power drill. Apparently, her worst-selling item ever was a pillow that read, "A woman who is looking for a husband has never had one." Worst selling item. She sounds like a really yeah.
That's great.
So smart though.
Scandalous.
Yeah. So I tried so hard to find catalogs from the 60s and 70s and I could not, which bums me out. I'm going to keep looking because I feel like there's probably some really cool stuff in there.
Yeah, there's somebody selling one on
right.
eBay, some in the depths of the resale internet market right now.
So in the 80s, Lillian decided here, the focus of Lillian Vernon is going to be this idea that we bring the best gifts of Europe to you in the United States. And so that's where they went. Although to be honest, I don't feel like it looked much different than when we looked at the Lillian Vernon website last week.
No. But I can see that maybe a little.
I could see, yeah, I think so too.
It's like lots of steps up from Spencer's.
Oh my good Lord, yes.
But it's like the same idea, but it's like the fancier lady. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that. And even the stuff you and I were seeing in the on the website recently it's not cheap.
No, of course not.
Right.
No.
So Lillian Vernon was or Lillian Menashe, I suppose, owner of the Lillian Vernon Corporation, was really innovative in the area of catalogs in so many ways, as we've already discussed, even leaning into this more high-end brand proposition in the 80s, much like Spiegel, but also really an early adopter of technology, launched a website, a Lillian Vernon website that you could shop on AOL in 1995 when online shopping barely existed.
Right. That's still when you were waiting 10 minutes to get on to your
exactly.
AOL.
Dial up. I can't even imagine what that website looked like, but that was incredible. I mean, because we're Delia's, for example, was a little bit of a late adopter of of online shopping. So many other retailers were, and they went away. But Lillian Vernon was like, we're going to do this. Now.
Yeah. And who even knows it was just for optics at the time.
Right.
So
like a lot of these catalogs, it was bought by other companies as we got into this century, and it switched hands several times. So the current incarnation of Lillian Vernon, which is not much different than it was when we were kids, is not in any way affiliated with the original company.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's still around, and it seems like
it's
it does
still
okay.
around.
Yeah.
But also, as we were looking, I told you, one of my favorite toys of my life was a doll from Lillian Vernon catalog. It was a doll in a box with the little clothes, all the different outfits, and that you could dress her in. And as we're looking through the website, we saw it. it's still there. So like they're still carrying like the same stuff even.
Totally.
Like the same stuff, not even like the same kind of stuff, the same stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remembered so many of the toys from our youth, and they're still like how they're differentiating themselves is like you can get your name put on your Tonka truck or your xylophone or whatever else it is that you get.
Right. Yeah, so they're still going with the whole like here's the thing, but you can put your name on it.
Yeah, totally.
Get your name on it.
Yeah. And like I think that was what made I mean, I remember us getting the Lillian Vernon catalog, and we also got the Toys R Us catalog. And while the Toys R Us catalog was riveting in that it was like every toy ever, and we would just like pour over it for days and days, like the Lillian Vernon one felt fancier because like it was toys with your name on it.
Right. It felt very personalized.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, you're probably a kid like me where you wanted the thing that nobody else had. And it's like, well, I have this doll in a box and you have this doll in a box, but does your doll in the box have your name on it?
Exactly. And that seems to be like what they've really leaned into. Like just about everything available on the Lillian Vernon website right now is customizable. Like even when it feels weird, like why do you need your name on a xylophone? I don't know.
Right.
Right. So that's Lillian Vernon. So that brings us to like, we're teenagers now, right? We're getting into the teenage era of catalogs for ourselves. And, you and I both grew up in areas where there was like not much going on. I mean, for us to go to Best, we had to drive 45 minutes from our house, you know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Shopping was pretty minimal. The internet really didn't exist, or at least not in a way that intersected with my home life. And all the ideas I got about clothing came from teenage magazines, right? Or like if I got to watch MTV at my grandma's house. And so catalogs, when they arrived, were like a window to something that wasn't available to either of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was your access. It was your all access pass to the fashion world, which like at the time, like I don't know about you, but I didn't know too much about like the difference between like high fashion and like trends.
No,
and, like, that
not
kind
at
of thing.
all.
So it was just kind of like fashion is fashion and this is it.
And so enter into this world Delias, right? And I would pour over the Delias catalog for inspiration beyond even just shopping. Like it was similar to Spiegel in that it was editorial, but for us.
Yeah. And for the first time for us.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember like the models like had a very specific look. They were and they were posed in like very specific like ways. And it was just different. They were having so much fun. And it was like sexy fun.
Right.
It was like preteen sexy fun.
Well, I mean, like think about the catalogs that were coming to our houses at that point before Delia showed up. It was like, okay, we've got Spiegel, which is for our moms, maybe a Newport News, also for our moms. We could look at like Sears or JCPenney or any of those like larger catalogs. The clothes weren't going to be like, I don't know, they were just clothes, right?
They're basics.
Basic.
Yeah.
J. Crew was like really preppy and very expensive, so it's not like we were going to buy those.
Exactly. And it was a very specific audience too, I feel like. Yeah.
We did not get a Victoria's Secret catalog at my home, but obviously would have been very inappropriate for me. Maybe.
And it was and that's when it was actually just like underwear.
Yeah, and everything was like soft focus, you know. So
yes.
There wasn't like this was when Delia started showing up at my house, it was a really, really big deal. You know, like I was like, what the heck is this? How did they find me? And it was because, of course, I subscribed to like every teen magazine that existed.
Right. I was going to say the teen magazines were the gateway. Yeah, for sure.
Even like I remember the first teen magazine that I received was literally called Teen. My grandma bought me a subscription. And I am sure I could not make it through 3 pages of one of those right now. It was like such drivel. But it was like when it arrived, like the first week of the month, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to set aside 4 hours to read every single page of this magazine, even the ads.
I was going to say that you like couldn't even crack it open until you knew you had the time to spend to pour over it every
And I
detail
saved them all, right? So that for reference, because I would go back to
Oh, of
them. Right. And I mean,
course.
I even read the ads. Like I would read these things like 10 times. I could,
Well, that's the thing. There were 75%
oh my,
ads.
even though like sometimes it was sneaky, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember
But there probably weren't rules then like there
probably
are now about
not.
how you had
Oh
to
my God.
disclose
Yeah.
advertising. So you're just like, oh yeah. But for you and me, like we couldn't like it would say this outfit is from wherever, but we couldn't get it.
No, not at all. In fact, the only time I remember like feeling like, wow, teen is really like getting me is like they did a layout that was all clothes from Kmart. And I was like losing my mind. And it was right around my birthday. And my mom was like, okay, fine, we can go to Kmart. And I
Finally.
got like 4 pieces that were like at our local Kmart, which probably like now that I've worked in retail for so long, like it's not like the Kmart in York, Pennsylvania was getting all of the like best stuff anyway. They were definitely like not putting the like the most fashionable things there. But I remember getting like a tunic with matching leggings and a headband and a few other things and feeling like now I am so cool.
Well, and that was like your first taste of styling.
Yeah,
things.
totally. I remember the tunic was like teal with huge black polka dots and like a boat neck.
Oh,
Anyway,
man. That's
it
amazing.
felt very cool.
Yeah, my first Delia's my first Delia's experience was similar. It was a pair of board shorts.
Oh, I love that for you.
But they had like little dancing people from the 50s on them.
Wow.
And it was like I got the Delia's catalog and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get board shorts. And I don't know if you remember, I don't know if they were as hot where you were, but it was like they were everything. Board shorts. They were so cool. You didn't wear them to the beach, you wore them to school and you wore them, go around. But I wanted these board shorts and I remember my mom walking in and being like, why don't we just order them and we'll see? Because as I am now, I'm a plus size person.
Right.
I was kind of like on like in and out of plus sizing, not even like plus sizing really even existed for me back then. I was just shopping at Lane Bryant really, but it was like we read the measurements and it's like it could work, it might work, and like she was rooting for me and I was like just like rooting for me, and they came and they of course did not fit. They were like probably 2 or 3 sizes too small. So when you talk about going to Kmart and getting these pieces and pulling together and making it an outfit, what Delia's became to me and to probably a lot of people, I've talked about this on, different, social media platforms. What Delia's became was a place where you got your accessories because you could fake it. You could go to Lane Bryant and you can get your black polo dress. You remember the polo dresses?
Yes.
And you would just get the shoes and the bag and the sunglasses from Delia's, and all of a sudden you are invited to the party.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think like for me, I couldn't afford the clothing from Delia's, but I could afford the accessories. And it was like the same thing, like for me, where it was like,
I couldn't really afford the accessories either, but I remember like saving for like one thing.
Gosh, yes.
And then I'd save for like the next thing. And then my mom brought me to a Delia's warehouse sale. We drove probably like 2.5 hours and we stood in line for like an hour, 2 hours. And we finally got into this warehouse sale. And man, I just like went nuts. Everybody in there was going nuts. We were going mad. It was like the first warehouse sale they ever had.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine because at some point they opened, it was in the late 90s, they opened an outlet store in Reading, Pennsylvania. And I don't know how I got wind of this. They must have, well, they probably wouldn't have sent out an email. How would I have known about it? Maybe they sent us a card in the mail. And
yeah, or just, it was like a whisper.
I have no idea.
Like,
but
hearsay.
My grandma drove me to Reading and I had to I wanted to go to this outlet store, but I also was like, I'm a good kid, still I'm a good kid, was aware that my grandma had driven me all the way to Reading. So like we had to do what she wanted first. So we go to like the Vanity Fair outlet and we go buy Lee jeans for my uncle and we do all this stuff. And the last thing we do is go to this Delia's outlet. And I went wild. I bet I bought 40 things there because it was like t-shirts were like $5.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was at that. I went there too.
It was wild.
I went there too. We took a trip just for that store.
Oh, it was amazing.
To that outlet store. And it was an amazing store. And it was like one of those things where like the stuff that was in there was still like, kind of like the stuff in the catalog.
Yeah.
It wasn't too far off, It wasn't like, you didn't look at it and you're like, oh, that's like 3 seasons ago.
No, it was like they had tons of great stuff that was really current, and I didn't feel like, oh, I'm like the poor girl buying stuff at the Delia's outlet. I was like, wow, now I'm really part of this.
Yeah, yeah. And that's like what being part of it was the trick, right? They wanted you to want to be a part of it. You wanted to be like having all that fun that they're having.
Absolutely.
Do you remember they're like dancing and like laughing, and it's just the models in the catalog, and it's just like, yeah, I just want to be that. I don't want to do that.
And they were just so cool.
They were so cool. And it wasn't like, it was also like they had all kinds of different brands that you couldn't really get your hands on, especially where we lived.
Oh my gosh, like Roxy.
It was like Roxy, Quicksilver.
Sugar. I love that brand.
Sugar. Oh my gosh, Sugar. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a lot. I mean, they definitely changed over time and started selling more of their like own brand stuff. But like for what the time period that I think of as like peak Delia's, they had a mix, and it was just like, it made the whole thing so much cooler. So unlike some of our other catalogs, Delia's has never at any point sold guns or houses. Right.
They didn't really, they kind of like perfected their art, and that's where they stayed, but also may have been their demise, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, here, I'll tell you all about it. Are you ready?
Oh, tell me about it. I'm ready.
I did when I first started Clotheshorse. One of the first episodes I did was about Delia's, and anybody is welcome to go back and listen to that. But I think this version is going to be way more interesting because Jess is here to add color. So, okay. So Delia's was founded in 1993, which I was like, wow. I don't know. It just seemed like they were around way longer in my life than they really were, which really speaks to how impactful Delia's was, right?
It's all relative,
right.
Time moves slower, when you're in middle school, I guess.
Right, yeah, I guess so. So it was founded actually by 2 guys, Stephen Kahn and Christopher Edgar. They were former college roommates who lived in New York City and the West Village. And in the beginning, like, they didn't really know what they were doing, but they felt like there's money in selling clothes in a catalog to women. Like that was where they were. And they weren't wrong, right? But they
of course.
So they decided to focus on college age women. And it just didn't really go very well for them. They did this thing where rather than like mailing out catalogs to people, it was kind of like almost like the Avon lady, but of college campuses. So they would hire representatives on campus to like sling this stuff to their friends.
Okay, so it was feeling very
MLM, yeah.
Yeah.
And they did $139,000 in sales in their first year, which is not great. And after they deducted the cost of the inventory and the catalogs and gave the representatives their cut and all this other stuff, there was just nothing left. And I'm sure that they were like, what should we do next? There's probably a lot of panicking, etc. Then they decided, hey, wait a minute, what about teenage girls? And what about teenage girls all around the country? And what if we cut out these college representatives, et cetera, this Avon lady model, and we just sell directly to them? And the first year they did this, their sales increased to $5 million, like right out of the gate. Like it was like, oh, wow. It was very obvious that this was the right choice. And, teenage girls were the fastest growing part of the population in the mid to late 90s because all the millennial girls, like the oldest millennial girls, were starting to grow up. We've got the Zennial girls, and, there's going to be the younger millennial girls in the pipeline, right? So this was like a great time to start.
And nobody had ever really
Nobody had done it at all. Absolutely.
Right. And they were following that curve of teen magazines.
Yeah. I mean,
17 and, YM and all those.
It's so interesting to me that no one did this before 1993 because teen magazines were such a big business for so long. But like people still, even when I think of like the mall stores that were around when I was young, like not even a teenager, but like a child, like think about like Gap or Express or Limited or all those stores, like they weren't for teenage girls either. They were like for women, I guess, just women.
Yeah, I think it was right, just women. And it was probably one of those things where nobody was really realizing that that was even a market. Like they either put those girls or us girls really into the child category or the adult category. Like I was squarely in the adult category because I was a size, 14, 16 by then. But nobody knew where to put them, or they would just automatically put them somewhere and never realize that there's a whole market right there in your
Totally.
face.
I started high school, I was 4'8". And it meant that I couldn't fit into adult size clothing because I'd have to roll the pants up to my knees, basically and it was like really painful for me because there was if you were a tween or a young teenager, there were not options, right? You could either dress like your mom, right?
Right, which is what I did because I had no other choice.
Or you could dress like a child, which is what I had to do. I do remember this being the era of you go to school and the girls who went through puberty first were dressed like they were going to go work at the bank later.
Oh, yeah. We would have the same outfit on. That was me.
Yeah.
I was 6 feet tall in eighth grade or whatever.
Exactly.
And I would have the same outfit on as the school secretary.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, I looked like I had gotten lost. Gotten off the wrong bus and ended up at high school. Yeah. And so it was a really weird time. So I think that what shocks me most about the Delia story is it took someone until 1993 to figure this out. Let's take a moment to thank a new supporter of Clotheshorse, Athletic Greens. They have a product I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because it's important that I feel as healthy and energized as possible if I'm going to be able to do all the stuff I need to do in a given day, from working my day job to creating Clotheshorse to reading my ever-growing mountain of books. This means I need a supplement that fits into my life easily and is actually enjoyable to take. I've taken some very unenjoyable supplements. For a while, it seemed like half my suitcase for every business trip was just bottles of vitamins, and AG1 has changed my life because it only takes up a tiny, tiny bit of space in my bag, and I really enjoy taking it. Who says that about a supplement? I have never said that before, but I mean it. I've been on it for a few months now, and I love it. It doesn't taste like it's super healthy. It has a kind of mild tropical with a hint of vanilla taste that I actually look forward to each morning. I'm serious. I'm excited to drink it in the morning. So you're probably asking, what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food-sourced ingredients, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, aging, all of the things you care about. It's very lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, or only Taco Bell, AG1 fits for you. It also costs you less than $3 a day. It's way cheaper, trust me, I did the math, than getting all of the different supplements yourself, which I appreciate as a very thrifty person. I also love that I'm skipping all of the plastic packaging waste for all of the supplements I was taking in the past. So many containers. I am not an athlete. When I do work out, it's in very uncool pajamas. But AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits for me. It's one thing I can do every single day to take great care of myself. For every purchase, Athletic Greens donates to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the United States. In 2020 alone, AG donated over 1.2 million meals to kids. My other vitamins weren't doing anything for anybody else except filling up my suitcase. Right now is a great time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. Shake it up and enjoy it. There's no need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. Seriously, the first thing I do every morning, well, first I feed the cats, but then I mix up my scoop of AG1 with some water, I shake it up, and I sit on the couch and drink it while I listen to NPR, and it is delightful. To make it easy, because I know you're so jealous, you want to try this now, Athletic Greens is going to offer you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/clotheshorse. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/clotheshorse to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. You know, we're in the 90s now. Delia's is like starting to figure it out here. And like they were able to just build this business so fast because there were so many teen and tween girls at this point. According to the New York-based Rand Youth Poll, in 1997, girls between the ages of 10 and 12 spent just $2.60 per week on clothing. But their older sisters, who would have been the Delia's customer, had allowances, part-time jobs, birthday money, their parents' credit cards if they were super lucky. They were spending almost $30 per week on clothing and apparel.
All that babysitting.
That's like
man.
$60 right now in 2022.
Yeah.
So like they were spending a lot of money on clothes. Honestly, probably teenage girls are spending less money on clothes now because clothes are cheaper and they're getting more. Clothes were expensive when you and I were that age. Like comparatively, it's kind of wild to think about it.
It is. It really is.
So what was great about Delia's, among many things, one, they were serving this customer that just was not being served by anyone unless you wanted to go to like a juniors department at a department store where it wasn't going to, I mean, you would see brands like Guess or like Esprit, but in general,
Jordache,
yeah, but it wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't like editorial. It wasn't fashion, you know, it was just brands.
Yeah, it was kind of like an afterthought.
Yeah, exactly.
To like stuff you were selling to your mom, you know.
So that was like one thing, like they were already offering this product that no one else was offering, but also small town and suburban girls could have the opportunity to dress like they lived in New York City, right?
Oh, yes.
So Delia's is like killing it, right? Then they start placing advertisements in teen magazines. And then, you know, everybody, I mean, you and I were there, we're reading every single page of every single issue. These ads were everywhere. Everybody's requesting a catalog. And in this time period, which we're going to touch on a few times, the most valuable thing you could have as any retailer was a whole bunch of addresses for potential customers. Like people would pay top dollar for access to your mailing list. So by 1996, Delia's had more than 1 million names in its database. They were distributing catalogs in the United States and Japan. They were doing $30 million in sales per year. I mean, this was just so huge.
Yeah, lightning in a jar,
right?
For sure.
So they took Delia's public. They immediately raised $20 million. They did a secondary offering 6 months later because this is just how on fire Delia's was. And they brought in another $20 million in financing. So they were able to just like grow and grow and grow. Eventually they opened that outlet store. But like at that point, they were like, we're not opening stores. Like our focus here is the catalog. And apparently I found this article in the LA Times from 1997. And you know, the company CEO at that time said, like, listen, we had a difficult time in the beginning convincing investors that a catalog for teenage girls was a successful business idea. But they were able to sell it by, first off, coining the term magalog, which you and I love. Combination of magazine and catalog. And I will say, like,
Always love a combined word.
Right. Yeah. And Delia's like embodied it, right? Like the way we used it was not just for shopping, it was for inspiration and daydreaming and all these other things.
And you'd cut those pictures out and you'd put them on your binder and dream about the outfits. And
Totally. And so they were able to sell this idea, this magalog idea to investors and say, like, listen, we're going to be like MTV, but for clothing.
But for clothing.
So we're going to, I mean,
Mail
imagine
order
saying that in
clothing.
2022, people would be like, what? Like full of weird reality shows? I don't even know what's on MTV now.
I couldn't tell you.
But you have to imagine in the 90s, like, and I will speak to this from my own experience, like MTV was killing it, right?
Yes.
Right. So if you went to an investor and said, listen, this catalog, this magalog is going to be like MTV, and that it's going to be serving customers brands and aesthetics, and they're going to love it, and they're going to keep coming back for more, just like they do MTV. Investors are like, okay, yeah, like, let me get my checkbook, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And talk about another thing that's 75% ads.
Seriously,
yeah. It would be like a 30-minute show, and it would be like 7 minutes of the actual show.
You know, it's funny. Like if I get an ad on Hulu right now, I'm like, oh God, you're ruining everything, blah. But like, I swear back then I was like immune to ads. It's like my brain didn't differentiate them from the real content at all.
Well, I think that was by design.
Yeah.
They made the ads like a part of the programming to look like the programming and to give you the same feeling as the programming. And so it just became a whole. You remember House of Style?
Oh, loved it.
It's so good. But that is what I'm thinking of when I say that it was 7 minutes of the actual show, and then like the 23 minutes that were left were just ads for things that could be on the show.
When we finally got cable television, we lived so far out in the sticks, it wasn't even available where we lived until around the time I started high school. And I will tell you that if it was like the summer or a weekend, I would watch MTV for like 12 hours at a time.
Easy,
yeah. Right? Everything.
Well, and there also like there wasn't even like with cable, there wasn't like 300 channels. It was like maybe like 45 or 50 channels, you know?
Yeah, totally. Totally. And so Delia's was like way ahead of its time in so many ways, right? Like the catalog, the magalog, if you will, allowed Delia's to sell a lifestyle in addition to products. And you and I both know, I mean, you know, we both worked for example, that it was all about selling a lifestyle when we were there.
Absolutely.
But Delia's really started this, I think. I mean, I think Spiegel was going for that, but with like a different customer. I think that there was previously not, why would you sell a lifestyle to teenagers? What's the point? You know, like that's what people were thinking. But I think this honestly set up the millennials as a generation to be really obsessed with lifestyle identity that comes from brands.
Which continues.
Totally continues. It's all Delia's fault. Also, like Delia's really foreshadowed the direct-to-consumer fashion revolution, which we saw play out in the early days of e-commerce, like where these brands were solely online, which I gotta tell you, like was something that, you know, we take it for granted now, like a brand you could only buy online, like big whoop. But like back in the early aughts, it was like, that'll never work. How will you ever run a business without having stores? And then we got Nasty Gal and ModCloth and Glossier. And I mean, there's like a million other brands, right? That only sell online. And all of that path to being a brand that you can't buy in a real store began with Delia's.
Right.
And Delia's really sold this idea, this lifestyle that you, just by calling 1-800-DELIA New York, that was the number, you could be a part of that lifestyle. You could be like that super cool, having a great time, being kind of edgy and like different than everybody else. You could be that person just by getting your parents' credit card or filling out the form in the center of the catalog, mailing it off with a check and waiting.
Sending it in, putting it in.
And waiting, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks is what I'm guessing it was.
I mean, I'm thinking like at least 21 days. Yeah, so at least 3 weeks.
At least. And like if there were holidays, add some time in there, you know?
Right. So it was probably 21 business days. So you have to like go through the calendar and I remember like going through the calendar and counting and be like, okay, maybe like this week it'll be there and I'll wait for it. And it just made it very exciting and very special. Very, very special.
Yeah, very, very special.
So when you got it, you finally got it, you just coveted it.
And I guarantee their return rate was probably tiny, tiny decimal point of returns because you would have had to go mail that back off after you waited
Of
3 or
course.
4 weeks for it. No, you're keeping that, right?
Of
Right.
course.
Yeah.
You're just gonna make it work. Like, I think those board shorts probably went to my sister. I very highly doubt that we sent
No,
them
I
back.
doubt it. I doubt it. I feel like returning things was just like not a thing back then. And I do think like when you and I were talking about this episode and like planning it out, when we got off the phone, I was really thinking a lot about, and I'm still like piecing this together in my mind, but how e-commerce and the ability to get product faster and faster and faster made us less like emotionally connected to it. And so we're more likely to return it or never wear it or not care about it as much.
Or just throw it out. Yeah. It's that like disposable clothing kind of idea.
Every time Delia's comes up on social media, like on the Clotheshorse account, like people have stories of like, I bought this coat or I got it for Christmas and like I still have it, or like I wore it a million times and like my mom has it. Like it was very different than like the relationship I have in like from like 2010 going to Forever 21 every Tuesday with my friend Rachel to get clothes to wear that weekend, you know?
That weekend and that weekend only.
Yeah, exactly. So Delia's also just had like their product assortment was so on point, as we know, crop tops, wide leg pants, chokers, the cutest backpacks, girl size skate sneakers, platform Mary Janes, everything was so on point. And
yes,
I found out that one of the reasons it was just like so perfect was that even though the company was founded by men and they ran the company, they hired young women to pick the product, like buyers who were really the customer.
Yeah, genius. That's genius.
Right? Because I'm going to tell you, not the case in a lot of places I've worked. In fact, some of the places I worked, it was sort of like, I don't know, like management and the buyers kind of looked down on the customer as like, she only likes the worst stuff. I'm going to go buy some more terrible stuff that I will never wear. And like, I like to imagine that if you went into the Delia's office, everybody working there was wearing Delia's clothing. And that is just like not a situation if you went to most retailers right now and checked out their buying team.
Well, let me tell you, I did go to the Delia's office.
What? Okay, what was it like?
Okay, I was such a super fan, and my family was taking, like my whole family, my aunts and my cousins, and my mom and my sister and I were going to New York City. And I was like, what's in New York City, Mom? Delia's. And she's like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't think it's like really, a real place. And I was like, no, we have to go there, or we have to get in the elevator and go up, and we have to talk to someone there. And so my mom, the best mom ever, brought me to the office building.
What?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And we just kind of walked in. There was it wasn't anything fancy. It was just kind of like a, just a regular office building. We got in the elevator. We went up. The elevator opened to the workspace.
What?
Yeah. And there were young women all sitting there in Delia's clothes.
Of course.
Nobody, not anybody super highly styled or anything, but at work wearing the clothes. And they're like, yeah, we don't really have anything here. We just are it was kind of like the place where I guess you could call and order stuff. It was more administrative, and it was just it was the address. It was the address that was on the catalog. And that's where we went.
Wow, that is so cool. Wow.
And they're like, sorry, we don't have anything here, but they let me order something from the catalog, and they sent it to us. They gave us a huge discount and didn't pay for it. They paid for shipping.
Wow.
That's how they and I remember it was a baby doll shirt with a dragon velvet applique.
Wow.
On the front. And I had that shirt for years, and I loved it. It was my souvenir from Delia's office.
Wow.
But yeah, you're right. It was all young women that were working there. So I imagine even, going up the company, it was probably, they kind of had that feeling throughout. I mean, that's the only way I can see it working and being so successful, is if they fully immerse them.
Totally. And I think that that's why so many other brands miss now, because they're people making the decisions about the product aren't really like connected to the product, you know?
Yeah, right. It's about speed and money and
Yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of thing.
absolutely, absolutely. So Delia's was also very successful because they brought brands to their customers who were living all over the United States and I guess also Japan. They brought them brands that like you could only get if you like lived in a big city or like near a skate shop, like Sugar, Roxy, Rocket Dog.
Rocket
Tons of
Dog,
other skate
yes.
brands that don't exist anymore. When I was researching this, like I found so many brands. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh wow,
Hmm.
I remember that from seeing that in Sassy, that kind of stuff. And so
Yeah.
most of those brands were in New York or LA. And if you lived in, Collingswood, New Jersey, or wherever you were, like you couldn't get it, right? You certainly couldn't get it in Manchester, Pennsylvania, where I lived. And so like these were brands that suddenly we could get access to. It's interesting. I remember back when I was researching the Delia's episode that I did back in 2020, that there were a lot of people who, analyze and think about these things and write think pieces about Delia's and such, right? They credit or blame, you pick your favorite term there, Delia's for basically ending regionalism, meaning that suddenly everyone could have access to everything. And previously,
Wow.
especially as a teenager, what you wore, the culture, the trends that you lived within were dictated by where you lived and the people around you, not by external factors. And so suddenly Delia sweeps in and everybody can get Rocket Dog, right? Everyone can get baby doll tees or shirts with dragons on them or whatever. But previous to that, like you wouldn't have even seen that at school. Like we always had the
Yeah.
trends that came and went. I specifically in my middle school were so bizarre. Like I remember one year it was like wearing boat shoes without socks and they had to be straight laced,
Yes.
right?
I remember barn jackets with corduroy
Oh my
collars.
gosh, yes.
We kind of were in the same region.
Totally. So ours were
So
similar,
maybe we
right?
need to ask. Yeah, so it was similar.
Right. I remember there was this shirt, which I never had, but it came from Express and it was just like a basic ribbed shirt that was like a boat neck with 3/4 sleeves, and every color it came in was ugly, and every girl who was popular had it. That was like a thing. Spree tote bags were huge.
Yes, I do remember that.
I
I
still
remember
want one.
T-shirts. What are those T-shirts that like they would like change color
Hypercolor.
with hyper
Yeah,
color.
yeah.
I remember that. Like there were a lot of there were a lot of things like that. But to blame Delia's for that entirely, I don't know, because I was like, we were watching TV.
Yeah.
We were watching like Full House.
Totally. I mean, if I were going to blame anything for the end of regionalism, I would say it's the internet. And this is something that Dustin and I talk about all the time is like, aged hipsters. We're like, remember when we were kids and if you wanted manic panic, you had to drive like 3 hours? Like I would have to go get someone to drive me to like Baltimore if I wanted to get like cool punk hair dye. I mean, I guess you could have gone into like South Street or something and
Right, South Street.
But it was like a destination, right? And now, like, if I wanted manic panic, I could probably have it by tomorrow by ordering it online. And so I think the internet really obliterated regionalism. But it's interesting to think about Delia's being the first, I don't know, seed of it all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Yeah, I mean, the two places that you mentioned like are California and New York, and those were two very distinct styles at the time, and then merged the two among others. And Japanese fashion. I mean, you're saying like in Japan it was a big deal, and that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, totally. I think like and Delia's helped a lot of brands that were very small in that time period, whether they were in New York or LA or Japan, helped them actually build up business and gain wider distribution. So Delia's definitely did have an impact on the brands that even exist now by giving
that makes a ton of sense.
Totally makes sense, right?
But it also is like kind of sad in a way because I remember the products being so high quality, like so deliciously made. It was almost like it was handmade by someone, like that kind of quality.
Totally.
And, and I'm sure it gave rise to like, fast fashion.
Absolutely. It really did.
As these because they were small businesses, and as they grew, they, they looked for cheaper and cheaper ways to manufacture. And, I'm preaching to the choir at this point, but
Yeah. Well, even Delia's
yeah.
itself, like in the beginning, it was like this mix of these really special brands and then their own product. And by the time we got into this century, it was all their own product, except for maybe some t-shirts. And it was starting to show the signs of fast fashionization, right?
Yes.
You and I talked about how there was like, there were stores. I remember there was one in the King of Prussia Mall, and I was really excited to see it. I went in there one time and I never went in again because it was like 95% graphic tees. And I was just like,
racks and racks, round racks and round racks and round
and I was like, wow, you've really squandered, because like in my mind, Delia's was like one of the most fashionable places you could shop for quite a while, right? And definitely until I went to college and moved to New York City, and then like there were even more options, but I still looked at Delia's as really cool, and then that kind of dissipated.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those things where they got that like feeling with the you got a feeling with the catalog that did not translate in stores. That's something that Urban Outfitters was always good at. Like the catalog translated so beautifully in the stores.
Right.
They put so much effort into to this day into their store designs, and have people that just do that. And Delia's didn't really do that.
No,
it was like junk. It was like a kind of sparse.
It could have been a wet seal,
It could have been a wet seal, but it wasn't even as like cool. It didn't even feel as cool as the wet seal.
No, not even. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it felt very young at that point, but like younger than teen, like more tween.
Yeah.
So Delia's was all about this lifestyle, and so they started with clothes and accessories and shoes, but eventually expanded to stickers, pens, school supplies. They even put out. It started as like an insert, like a home decor catalog with like cute bedding, but then it turned into like a full-on its own catalog of like inflatable chairs and bedding and beaded curtains and lamps, and know it all. And it was expensive.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
My best friend Lauren, her dad, her parents got divorced, and her dad bought a new house, and she was able to decorate her room, and it was like that. She got to pick out like everything.
Oh my God.
That housewares, when they got into like the real houseware stuff, the whole room, I could still see it. It was amazing. It was amazing.
I bet, because I was looking at some of the like home decor stuff a few days ago, and I was like, wow, like I would buy this now. Like there's some really cool prints,
Very cool prints.
Very cool.
And just like everything was like kind of like bubbly, like rounded.
Yeah.
And uncomfortable and scratchy.
Yeah.
But still loved it.
Loved it. Yeah. The thing about Delia's is like, it felt really expensive to me. And I think that's because like all clothes were expensive when we were that age. Like it must be so weird to be a teenager now and go on Shein and buy like 10 things for $50 or whatever. But that was just like not what it was when we were that age, right? And so I always thought Delia's was really expensive. But when I started to really look, Delia's pricing was the same as everything else you could buy at the mall if you went to like Express or the Gap. But it was like 1,000 times cooler. And it was like especially for you, not just something you were buying because that's all that was being offered to you. And so it felt like, even though it wasn't a luxury price point, it felt very aspirational. And like when you bought something from Delia's, you were buying into this like much bigger thing that meant you were cool.
And I think that like that whole idea gave rise to the others like it.
Totally.
That went even beyond what or tried to go even beyond what Delia's was.
Totally.
Became,
And so like,
Magalogs.
So Delia's was like killing it, right? And they kept buying more and more mailing lists from magazines and from other catalogs and just like building their circulation. They did stuff like send out really cool music CDs and surprise gifts when you made a purchase. They like put in little postcards, and they were really doing all of these things that like e-commerce brands would really get obsessed with in this century, with the whole like idea of like unboxing and like that kind of stuff. In a pre-social media era, this is like pretty wild. So in 1997, Delia's is like, we're going to get on the internet. And they bought a company called Girl Interactive. It was G URL, right? And this was a website started by 3 female students at NYU called girl.com, where they had magazine-style articles, games, bulletin boards, chat rooms. It was very like of the time. So deliasbiasgirl.com. And they really like, they wanted the women who had started it to be kind of like leading the Delia's online experience. And so like they wanted to continue having girl.com as this platform for this other content, sort of like taking the Magalog idea to the internet. But then it would also be like, oh, while you're here, here's a link to the Delia's website to buy things.
Okay.
Right.
I think like I very vaguely remember this.
I totally had a girl.com email address for a very long time. Well, I feel like when you and I met, I probably still had that email address and used it occasionally. I wish I could get it back. Right? It was great.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So it seemed like this was great. Like I remember actually going to the girl.com website, I definitely did not spend a lot of time on the internet for quite a long time because, like internet was expensive. It was like kind of a luxury. I mean, you paid by the minute in many situations, right?
That's right. That's right.
But I would if I went to like the computer lab at school, I would totally go read girl.com while I was there, like between doing homework or whatever. And I actually remember a friend and I would frequently go to the computer lab that was in the basement of the library at NYU. And we would be down there for like 8 hours on the internet, like chatting with people and stuff. It was just like a weird time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that time.
Chat room era. So
chat room era. Yes. Dangerous.
Girl.com was like of the chat room era, which was like pre-social media, right? But chat rooms were social media. Same were these bulletin boards where like someone would come in and post like, oh my God, I'm so obsessed with this song. Who else is? And people would just reply. It's kind of like Reddit actually is now, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or Quora or like any of those.
Totally.
Yeah.
So,
but also like really creepy too.
Oh my God. Yeah.
There would always be like, you'd be in a chat room and everything would be fine. It would be fine. Like we're talking about like Nirvana. And then all of a sudden like some creep comes in. They're like, they'll say something like really horrible.
Right. Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah. And it's like, all right, this one's expired. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, totally. So this is 1997 and this is like ahead of the curve, I would say. And you were like, if we're going to stop the story here, I would be like, okay. And then Delia's conquered e-commerce and is the biggest retailer in the world right now. But we know that's not true. So what happened, right? Well, first, 1997 continued to be probably the biggest year for Delia's in terms of doing new stuff. So they started their own home catalog that was totally independent of Delia's. It was called Contents. I totally remember it.
What?
I remember getting it one time, and I swear there was a bedding set that was a blue sky with white clouds, and I swear if I could find it now, I would use it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
No, I had it.
Stop.
I had it, and oh gosh, I gotta find a picture of it. I had it, and I loved it, and I painted my walls to match it.
What?
So my bedding, and I'm sure I got it from there. I'm sure of it. And so my bedding and my walls were the same. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm
well,
sorry.
that is to this day, it's goals for me to find it secondhand somewhere, just so I can live my best life. So that was Contents came out. I couldn't find a lot of information about Contents. I think it lasted for a year or two, but a lot of Delia's stuff of this time, I think they just overdid it and things kind of went in and out really fast.
Yeah, well, it's that point that you can usually see with businesses that have failed where they just got a little too greedy.
Right, totally.
And they stopped paying attention to what the heart of it was, which was the experience.
Right. So next they launched Delias.com, which, tied into girl.com. Okay, this is good, right? They also bought a huge database of teen addresses. So now they had 11 million names on their mailing list. But one thing I want you all to remember is that when you are a teenager, life changes so fast, right? And one day Delia's is right for you, and the next day you're like, no, I'm into Urban Outfitters now, right?
Yes, and it's a very
Totally.
and it's a narrow window.
Right.
And it's a fickle time.
Which I think is another part of the problem Delia's faced. So they've got the home catalog, they've got girl.com, they've got all these lists of people who are rapidly becoming adults. Next, they launched, I remember this, a catalog called Droog, Droog, the first ever catalog aimed solely at teenage boys. And it was like,
I do not. There's no.
This was very
really.
short-lived, just like Contents, probably shorter, because like teenage boys did not want to shop from Delia's, you know.
No.
I think also this was like the same time where I think a lot of people who like, you know, were running the show financially for like publishing and Delia's, et cetera, were like, oh, well, now we got teenage girls, let's get teenage boys. They're the same, right?
As if they're
right.
the same,
And so Sassy launched, remember Sassy had Dirt, which like they put out like maybe 4 or 5 issues of, and that was like, oh yeah, teenage boys don't want to read this, right?
I do remember that. Now, did you get this Droog catalog because you had a brother, or did it just?
I think it just showed up. It just showed up, probably addressed to me. And then I guess the conceit would be that I would show it to my brother or something. And it was cool. Like for a very long time, I had such a crush on anyone, regardless of gender, who was like a skater. Like obsessed.
Absolutely.
Like I remember in college, one year I had a room, like I had a triple and my bed actually fit in the closet. And I wallpapered the entire closet with photos from Trans World Skate. And like so I remember Droog had that aesthetic. So for me, it was probably like receiving the Victoria's Secret catalog for other households where I was like, oh my God. So
funny. No, I definitely shared in that. I remember like in Clueless how like the skateboarding guy, he was like the less desirable guy. And I was like, no, do not understand, cannot compute.
I know.
He's like number one. He's like number one in my book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was me. Like I would during like breaks in school, like go sit over like at Astor Place and watch the skaters and just be like, maybe one of them will talk to me or look at me. I'm cool, right? And that was definitely like how I dressed. Like the day I arrived at college, I remember I was wearing a humongous Alien Workshop tee that someone had given me and these really huge wide leg corduroy pants that were from the boys department at Gabriel Brothers that I think were Levi's or something. And like, I felt like I was so cool, but then like nobody at NYU dressed like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that tracks. And also just going from like being cool and fashionable in your small town to when I went to school in New York City, the Fashion Institute of Technology.
I can't even.
Feeling like, oh God, it's like small fish, big pond.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There's like people across the hall. It was like a senator's daughter and she's wearing all Prada.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly like I got to college and I was like, wow, I don't fit in here at all. I guess I should.
Yeah, that still happens to me every time I go to New York City. I'm like, I look great.
And then I get there and I'm like, oh, I'm such a dirtbag. Yeah, I agree.
Such a dud.
Yeah, totally.
And everybody knows it.
They're like, did you get that purse for free? Yeah, exactly. I know.
Right.
Yeah, totally. If you're enjoying this episode, then this is a great time to remind you that my work here at Clotheshorse is made possible by the support of listeners like you, just like NPR, and these great small businesses. Please go give them your support. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at _Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at shop_velvetunderground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's Wear St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns. Handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed. Made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand ethically made by hand from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage towels. Founder Danny has worked in the industry as a fashion designer for over 10 years, but started Picnic Wear in response to her dissatisfaction with the industry's shortcomings. Picnic Wear recently moved to rural North Carolina, where all their sewing and accessories are now designed and cut, but the majority of their sewing is done by skilled garment workers in New York City. Their customers take comfort in knowing that all their sewists are paid well above New York City minimum wage. Picnic Wear offers minimal waste and maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Cute Little Ruin is an online shop dedicated to providing quality vintage and secondhand clothing, vinyl, and home items in a wide range of styles and price points. If it's ethical and legal, we try to find a home for it. Vintage style with progressive values. Find us on Instagram at Cute Little Ruin. The Pewter Thimble is a curated secondhand shop based out of Rome, Italy. Owner Desiree Marie Townley has a background in costuming and makeup for dance and opera and focuses on dressing for the character you want to be in the world. Curated collections are dropped in a story sale and always have a specialized theme, like the color palette of Starry Night, the film classic Casablanca, and the children's novel The Secret Garden. Desiree works with local artisans, and pieces are rescued from markets and rehabilitated and resold with worldwide shipping. The Pewter Thimble is a collection of pieces that will have eternal style from the Eternal City. Discover more on Instagram at The Pewter Thimble. So Delia's is spending money like it's going out of style, but they were also making so much money. Like that year, 1998, they made $80 million in profit, which is, none of the businesses I've worked for in this century were outside of were making that kind of profit, in 1 year.
Wow. Yeah.
So in 1999, they're like, wow, we have all this money. We're launching all these catalogs that might be ill-advised. You know what we should do now? We should start opening stores. And so they opened their first store in White Plains, New York in 1999. And 10 years later, there were 115 stores across the United States.
10 years in the span of 10 years.
But of course, and this has played out other places I worked, cough, cough, nasty gal. They signed some really expensive leases on these stores, and the stores just never made enough money to cover that. And I mean, this is just like so many businesses go under because of this, and Delia's was like killing them. And they also were having a lot of issues with getting into e-commerce. They tried to spin off Delias.com into its own business. It didn't really work. So they brought it back in. They were losing money. Technologically, they were just so far behind. They just couldn't catch up. And then they started buying, I feel like they were just desperate by the early aughts. They were just buying every children's apparel catalog that was out there in the hopes of just like bringing these people in as Delia's customers or expanding their product offering. They
like a long game,
I guess so. But
thing.
Then they were like, oh shit, we're running out of money. So by 2001, they sold off all of their like non-core Delia specific properties, including Droog contents, all these things. They sold girl.com to 17. Right. So they were just like having a hard time. But rewinding back into the late 90s, competitors began to pop up everywhere. And they were, in some cases, doing what Delia's had been doing, but doing it better. Right. So there was Moxie Girl, which had a 76-page magalog. They were from Manhattan Beach, California. And they actually, in addition to it being a full-ass catalog of things you could buy with some like articles and stuff mixed in, they also had advertisements in it from other companies.
Yeah.
Did you ever buy anything from Moxie Girl? Do you remember this one?
I do. I bought my freshman year homecoming dress from Moxie Girl. Yes. And it was awesome. It was like my first bodycon type of dress. And I loved it. It was great.
I remember buying, I there's no way I dreamed this, a beret that had a butterfly embroidered on it, which is like so something I would have worn then.
Yeah.
Loved a butterfly.
Wait, you think you dreamed it up, or you're sure? You're sure?
There's no way I dreamed this up, right? Like I remember ordering something from Moxie Girl one time, and I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And I remember thinking like, no one else will ever have a beret with a butterfly embroidered on it. And so I don't know why I'm like discrediting myself, because I remember only buying from them one time, because I feel like Moxie Girl wasn't really around for that long.
No, it wasn't. I think I only bought from them that one time as well.
So next there was Girlfriends LA.
Yes.
And this one, I might be remembering it wrong, but I felt that they were a lot more size inclusive. Am I imagining that?
Yes, it was the first one. So there were like 5 in that era, 5 catalogs. Delia's was obviously the first one, and the rest of them were kind of piggybacking off of it. But Girlfriend LA was the one that went up to 3X, which was unheard of. It had never been done before. Yeah, and at that time, I was no longer in plus sizing, but I still remember it. And then like later on, when I was again, it was something that was actually available to me. So I appreciated it before Torrid.
Yeah, this was pre-Torrid. So for plus sizes, you had like weird stuff from the department store that probably looked like something your mom would wear, or Lane Bryant, which was also for grown-ass women, right? Like it just wasn't.
Yeah.
If you were a teen, you were out of luck, right? So
right. And the other thing that they did that was really unusual, and still is unusual to this day, is that it was like, excuse me, it was like most of the product line was size inclusive.
Incredible. I remember that. I don't think I ever bought anything.
I remember not really believing it. I mean, like,
it's too good to be true, because it's wild.
It was like, right, it's so wild. Like, it's never been done, so you don't even like. I didn't even believe it was true.
It's pretty wild. Like very ahead of its time. And then
I just remember it. Like, I remember it, however, being like a little bit less.
Yeah, it wasn't as cool. It wasn't as cool. I remember that. It was, and it definitely had a lot of like homecoming dresses, and like, I don't know, it was very teenage girl, but not in like a cool way. Like it just wasn't, I don't know, but the size inclusivity was so unheard of. I mean, even now, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so next there were two different catalogs which I remember getting that were I don't know if they were both owned by Alloy, but there was Alloy, which was massive, and there was another one called Airshop. And I remember Airshop was a little bit more ravery, which was great because at this point I was like, oh yeah, now I'm a raver. It was a short-lived window where I did a lot of drugs.
Me too.
Oh my
Oh
gosh!
yeah.
Oh
I
my
worked
God.
at Scream at the mall. Like that's where we
Of
that's where we
course,
worked.
yeah.
I don't remember
Yeah,
Airshop,
exactly.
though.
I was very short-lived, whereas Alloy was like massive. I definitely ordered Gencos from Airshop. Okay. And probably some sort of baby tea to go with it, for sure. But Alloy, I would say, of all of the catalogs we've talked about, is probably the one that I shopped the most often. And as an adult, like a young adult, but like it was around for quite a bit longer. And Alloy you could like shop online.
Yes.
You know, it was, and so they actually, both Airshop and Alloy began as websites and then started sending out catalogs. And Alloy was so on fire and just so good at what it was doing that they bought Girlfriends LA as well.
Oh, okay.
So Alloy ends up, and we're going to come back to this in a minute, but Alloy ends up being like the number one rival of
that
Delias.
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Because if it wasn't Delias for me, and I at this point was like such a catalog, like a snob. If it wasn't Delias, then it was Alloy.
Totally. And Alloy was cool. It was a lot more focused on brands than Delia's was at that point, where it was like your Roxy, the Sugar, all the things, you know, all the brands that like as a teenager and like a early 20s person of that time period, I was like, these are the coolest brands. Like Alloy focused on those. And I definitely shopped from Alloy more regularly than any of these other places. They also would have really sick sales. I remember like literally imagine a catalog coming to your house that is a clearance catalog. It's so wild.
Oh, that's right. They would put out just clearance catalogs, right?
And it would be like a smaller size. Like it wouldn't be the full width of the other catalog. But when it showed up, you were like, holy shit, I better get on the phone right now.
Yeah, everything would sell out. Like by the time it got to you, it was probably everything was gone.
Yeah, what a wild idea, right? So, okay, so it's 2003. And Delia's is in a bad place. They're selling off everything. They kind of they're losing money on all these stores, and they're just starting to lose kind of their cachet a little bit. Their website is busted. No one's using it. In swoops Alloy. Even though Alloy started their business 2 years after Delia's, they were in a much stronger financial place than Delia's had been for quite a while. They'd never bought other catalogs the way Delia's had been. They'd never opened brick and mortar stores, which are cash drain. They had done this really smart thing where they bought other marketing companies, like direct-to-consumer marketing companies, so they could expand their reach to teenagers. And they, better than Delia's ever had nailed the logistics of warehouses and shipping, order fulfillment, all that stuff. Whereas Delia's was very inefficient.
Yeah, well, they went from like just being kind of like drop ship, right? Or maybe like, working with small businesses. Whereas Alloy like kind of started out working with larger businesses.
Right. It was definitely Alloy just had a lot more of the operational stuff that Delia's had never figured out. And to be fair, Delia's had more of the aesthetic reach, especially in the beginning. But
even now, I'm like, no, Delia's.
Yeah, for sure, right?
Like
for sure, Delia's is like no one's sitting around like, Alloy,
catalog,
Alloy, so iconic.
Except for like us.
Right. But even still, if you were like, you can have Alloy or Delia's, I would pick Delia's every single time,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. Alloy had like a lot of other like junk. I feel like it wasn't as clean. The experience.
It got weird over time, and like there was no brand to be had from Alloy. Like they sold brands, and you'd be like, great, I'm coming here to buy these brands, but you weren't like Alloy is the brand. Whereas with Delia's, like Delia's was the brand.
Yeah, and I remember like even like their models were consistent. It was like always the same, like 12 people.
Yeah, definitely. So Alloy had conquered the operational side of the business, which is just as important, but Delia's had conquered the brand side of it. And so it made sense for them to join forces, right? I mean, it wasn't really a join forces. They were bought. But like it makes sense that the whole package would be there. And thanks to all of Alloy's like really smart decisions, Alloy's distribution, like circulation list was 60 million addresses, whereas Delia's at its peak had just cracked 35 million. So Alloy just had bigger reach. I also, and I might be remembering this wrong, you can tell me if I'm wrong, didn't Alloy have guys' clothing as well?
I think so.
Like in the back half of it or something?
I was thinking that. I think they did a little bit. It was just a little bit. Like maybe like 4 pages out of, I don't know, like 30 or something.
Yeah. But it felt less teenage girl
and it wasn't like pushing it like Droog was doing. It was more like, like you're going to shop at this catalog and your mom and dad are going to look at it and be like, okay, we can pick out a couple things for back to school. And like, while we're at it, since we're already filling out the form or we're already calling the number, we might as well get these things for your brother, kind of thing.
Totally. So it's pretty smart. So they bought Delia's for a mere $50 million, which is like so tiny for the size of the business at that point. And I think every analyst out there was like, they're going to like dominate the world, right? Because this was like a mega company. Because at that point, their mailing list was 30 to 40% of all U.S. consumers who were between 12 and 18 years old.
That's absolutely insane. And the market is not yet saturated either.
Right. So here's the thing. It didn't work. I know you're shocked to hear that, right? For one, despite the fact that Delia's was just bleeding money on stores, they just kept opening more stores anyway.
Okay.
That was problematic enough. Then we have to remember that the age group of 12 to 18 years old is constantly shifting its allegiances, its interests, its trends, right?
And it also just happens fast and then you're done.
It happens really fast. And speaking of fast, this is when fast fashion is beginning. So we've got H&M and Zara and Forever 21 starting to pop up. They're small. They're not like what now we're like, oh, those are like the old school fast fashion brands, but they're just starting then.
It's like how vintage.
The product, right? Totally. Their product was incredibly similar to Delia's, but it was half the price.
At Alloy it was, you're saying?
At H&M and Zara and Forever 21. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just like half the price. I mean, I remember Forever 21. You would go in there with $50 and leave with a huge bag of clothes. And it was like, how does this happen?
Yes. Once again, another fashion moment you cannot believe. Going to like the Manhattan Forever 21.
Yeah, totally.
Like
totally.
A whole new wardrobe, a whole new me.
Totally. And so this is just like the early stages of that, right? It's even, then we get to like 2012 or something and suddenly all the Forever 21s are like 3 stories. It's like crazy, but this is like the early days of it. Also, like, by this time period, Delia's and Alloy, like their core customer was this like alt girl, right? It was like alt girl aesthetic. Yeah. Here's the problem.
And the wannabes, yes.
Yes. PacSun and Hot Topic are now also moving into malls, and they also are selling to the alt girl in every mall in America. Like Hot Topic and PacSun are opening stores like they're going out of style, right? And they're being more successful about it. So now it's like a lot of the Delia's product offering is just like getting more and more watered down. It's graphic tees, it's low-rise jeans. It's not directional or aspirational in the way that it was in the 90s. And you can go buy low-rise jeans and graphic tees everywhere. And suddenly these places like H&M and Forever 21 and Wet Seal and, Contempo Casual, like they're cooler. They're trendier and they're the same price. They're cheaper. So why are you shopping from Delia's? And so
and they're also speedier. So they're working fast. Like everything is moving faster. And it sounds like Delia's is just like kind of like trying to stick to their old model when it's not appropriate. It's not going to work anymore.
Right. And so like Delia's is starting to feel like a place not for teenagers, but for tweens.
Right.
And so they're just like, they're losing customers.
Yeah, so they're like limited to now. Yeah.
So they're just bleeding money. Sales are dropping. Their inventory is rising. I've worked at places like this. It's a really bad place to be.
Yes, that's what happened at the end of Scream, which keeps coming
Yeah,
up.
Totally. Like, I mean, this is what happened at Nasty Gal,
Yeah.
Yeah. So they decide to do something that I have seen play out so many times in my adult life, which is they were like, we're going to bring in a new fancy CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And so they bring in a woman named Tracy Gardner, who previously had worked at J. Crew, where she had transformed J. Crew from like the preppy J. Crew that we know of the 80s and 90s into like a pretty solid fashion brand. Now, of course, all that goodwill is gone now too.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, like it's 2013, and you know who is like a diehard fan of J. Crew? Michelle Obama.
Mm-hmm.
It's that era. And
Yeah.
so Tracy Gardner was a big part of that, of making J. Crew a brand that was cool and stylish.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is all gone. A big part of that is actually a guy who was my boss at
What?
became the CEO of J. Crew and drove that business into the ground. This guy, when I worked with him, was an asshole. He threw a rolling rack of scarves at me in a meeting once.
Oh, yes. I've heard this story.
Yes. He would like love to humiliate and scream at people.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he like drove them into the ground and got them really discount focused, and like J. Crew has never rebounded from that, right?
Mm.
But they bring in Tracy Gardner in 2013 to Delias because she has like made J. Crew relevant again, for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And she brings in all these executives that she knows from J. Crew and Coach. And she's like, we're gonna redo this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing she does is sell off Alloy, because she's like, Alloy is not relevant anymore. So even though Alloy bought Delias and it's now this new mega corporation, now we're selling off Alloy.
Wow.
It's like so weird. Anyway,
Yeah.
this is how this goes, right? She thought, oh man, this is such a bad idea. I've worked so many places where like it's like, we're gonna do this. She said, listen, why don't we make Delias a brand for wealthier teenage girls? We'll bring in more expensive brands. We'll make it more aspirational, and we're really going to target this wealthier customer.
Right, which was the same thing that was happening at what's it called? The mall store with the plaid and the boys with no shirts.
Abercrombie.
Yeah. So they were trying to like buy into that exclusionary, marketing strategy.
I mean, this is exactly what happened at Nasty Gal. Basically, they brought in a new CEO who came from Lululemon and other places like that. And she said, we're going to make Nasty Gal the Barneys for millennials.
Mm.
And previously we were selling, like they were expensive for what they were, but it was like pretty affordable fast fashion that we just made look cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now suddenly we're going from selling $50 dresses to selling $200 dresses, except we're not selling them because no one's buying them.
Mm.
And that inventory hole was what I had to start digging us out of when I joined the team. And it's what I continued to do until we went out of business.
Womp. Yes. Oh gosh, the stress.
Because if you're a millennial with a lot of money, you're going to go shop at Barney's. Fine. RIP Barney's as well.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to start shopping at Nasty Gal. It just didn't make any sense. And it was very similar with Delias.
It doesn't. I don't even know how you'd even like get that customer over to you, because like you're already established as this like, fast fashion brand. I don't know. I don't see it. Like I see it happening every once in a while. Like I'll see some brand, they'll have like some special collection, like Madewell, for example. They'll do like these special collections, and it'll be like a pair of pants for $300. And I'm just like, that's weird. It's just like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. It is. So it always fails. And when I think about like at Nasty Gal, for example, if we were trying to say we were going to be Barney's for millennials, the reality is that millennials who wanted to buy like luxury brands or had that kind of money to sell were buying real luxury brands. Yeah. They're not going to come to us for it. And I would assume that if at Delia's you're like, we're going to start aiming for those like teenage girls who wear like real designer brands, they're not going to come and buy it from Delia's either.
No, it's usually the opposite. It's like we start as a luxury brand and we like end as like a fast fashion.
We water ourselves down. Yeah, exactly. And so as this often plays out, Delia's declared bankruptcy a year later. And like looking at this, like again, I haven't like looked at a lot of these notes or thought about them since the first time I did this episode about Delia's. I cannot believe how much this mirrors what happened at Nasty Gal, because a year after rolling out this, we're like going to be the Barney's for millennials thing. Guess what? We went bankrupt too.
Yeah.
And I just think like if you want to burn through a lot of money really fast and lose all your customers, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also it's like it's like too much too fast. Like who's to say that you couldn't like slowly work your way up to that? I don't know. I don't have any data to say yes or no, but you know, if you're going to do it, that seems like a better way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. And so like Delia's went bankrupt in 2015. A company bought the brand or what remained of the intellectual property, I guess, for $2.5 million. Tried to reopen online.
I remember
this.
I remember this.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too.
I remember one day being like, wonder what's going on with that. I haven't heard from them in many years. And like going on and seeing this sad website. And it was like, we're making it work. We're making it happen.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
I can't imagine trying to do this in 2015. I mean, like, what? Are you ready to go head to head with Forever 21?
Right. And also like this, like that's a different, you don't have the sentimentality on your side, you know? It's not like they're targeting like us, you know?
Right.
They're like trying to do it again, the same thing. And it's just it's a different world now.
It just doesn't work that way. So then Dolls Kill has like started, I want to say since about, let's say
it was like 2018, 19.
Yeah. They started licensing the Delia's brand name. They still do it. They even license some of the designs. And when you look at a lot of the product, you're like, oh, wow, that does really take me back. But I have to tell you, the quality is so egregious.
Yes, it's definitely like designer imposter Delia's.
Oh, because real Delia's was high quality.
Yeah.
The Dolls Kill stuff, the first drop they did, Dylan and I ordered some things and all of it got returned. It was so bad. There was a jacket that the zipper didn't even function on it. Like not even one time. And it was just horrible.
Yeah.
Like fast fashion at its worst.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at it now. The Delia's line on Dolls Kill. Yeah. So the beauty of this is like finally you can wear Delia's because it goes up to 3X, but it still only goes up to 3X. And also it's all made of polyurethane.
Yeah, exactly. So Alloy is still around, but in a very strange new format where it is a website that specializes in clothing for tall women.
What?
Yeah.
And that's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same people or the same.
Loosely, let's just say. Because remember, Delia sold off Alloy back in 2013, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely been bopping around.
Wow.
So it's technically not the same people, I guess, because it's probably been through 5 owners since then.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the latest incarnation of Alloy is clothing for tall women.
And Alloy is just web-based.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm looking at it and it's just a white background, black plain lettering, and it says Alloy Apparel. And it's a lot of tall women. Tall people. Yeah. Interesting. It does not have any of the original feel. It's just basics. Maybe a plaid pant, like a bold plaid pant thrown in, a leopard print maybe. There's a lot of pants, which I'm 6 feet tall. As a tall person, I appreciate this.
I know. Maybe you should start shopping from Alloy.
It's tall pants are their main thing.
Totally.
Wow.
It's I get it. It's like a niche.
Yes, it's absolutely
pick a niche and do it well.
And do it well, but it only goes up to XXL, which in Dolly Parton's America 2022, why aren't you catering to plus size people? Because 67% of the American women or whatever.
I know. I mean, don't get me started.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, people are these companies are so stupid.
Why don't you want all my fat money? Take it. I will give it to you.
I know. Especially if you're going to focus on your niche is tall women, go for it.
Yeah.
Dress all the tall women.
Go for it.
You will earn their loyalty forever.
And they'll be loyal. Yeah, forever.
I know. It's so ridiculous. So that's where Alloy is now. We know that Delia's is at Dolls Kill, and it's definitely the end of all of those brands, they're on. And I mean, even looking at the Alloy website and seeing what it is now, my guess is like when they sold off Alloy, what they really sold off was the intellectual property.
Right.
So the name, the mailing list, possibly some aesthetic stuff. When Nasty Gal went under and it was bought by Boohoo, it was the craziest thing. I mean, like Boohoo basically they bought the intellectual property of Nasty Gal. So they bought the website, they bought the mailing list, the email list at this point, right? And definitely like a lot of like graphics, the Instagram account, all that stuff, right? But they didn't buy any of the inventory. And so what happened was there was one night where at midnight, the Nasty Gal website turned off because they had been like having a fire sale for like a month, selling off all the inventory.
I remember that, yeah.
Because Boohoo was like, we don't want your inventory. Please we don't want that. Cut that out of the deal. So the website turned off and it turned back on a minute later and it was like Bizarro Nasty Gal where it looked almost exactly the same but just slightly different because it was like a new website that was hosted by Boohoo.
Right. But so was it like correct me if I'm wrong, was it just Boohoo? Wasn't it just Boohoo came up? Or was it like some like weird in between like in limbo?
No, it looked like Nasty Gal. The whole thing was rolled out so strangely. Like you can still go to nastygal.com and the website looks almost identical to how it did in 2015 and 2016, the last years of Nasty Gal. Like it's the same font and logo and everything. But when it turned back on, all the clothes were like a quarter of the price that they'd been before, but they looked otherwise very similar. And like there was no email that went out to customers, no announcement that was like, hey, Nasty Gal is now under new ownership or anything like that. And the old Nasty Gal forgot to ship out a ton of orders to customers. And so people were freaking out. No one had access to their orders or tracking because the Boohoo people were like, well, we're not, we're the new Nasty Gal. We can't help you. And it was like a nightmare for all those customers and probably for the people who do customer service for Boohoo.
Right. I'm sure. I was never really a customer, but I remember looking like just like following along because of the short-lived TV series Girl Boss.
Yeah, who could forget?
Who could forget?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times when I tell people I worked at Nasty Gal and they don't know me very well, they're like, oh my God, I was obsessed with that show. And I'm like, I've never watched the show because the job gave me PTSD and then it's like really awkward. Yes. So now I just say like, yeah, the show is really good because I don't want people to feel bad. But I've never seen it. My friend Kim and I are like, we will die without seeing that show.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah. No, I think that's good. That's a good boundary that you've set for yourself. It's a healthy boundary.
But anyway, I mean, it's like interesting to me having lived through a very similar scenario to what Delia's went through to now look at Delia's, this brand that I was obsessed with as a kid. I would absolutely watch a Netflix series about Delia's. Someone should make it.
Oh, why hasn't anybody made it?
I know. Like, I want to watch
We should make it.
We should make it. We're totally good at making shows, right? What can go wrong?
We'll just learn on the fly like we do with many things.
Yeah, totally. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. We're good at a lot of stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of Delia's. But I will say Delia's like set the tone for so many things that we take for granted in this century. Like, Delia's walked so Glossier could fly, like that kind of thing. Like these brands that, I mean, now Glossier has also peaked and is on like in a weird place too.
Yes.
To be nice. And, we're going to see a million other brands like that. Like this is just the life cycle of it. And it's really hard. I'm thinking of all the catalogs and brands we've talked about in this episode. It seems like Lillian Vernon is the most successful one.
Way to go, Lil. You did it.
Lil, you did it. And Hammacher Schlemmer.
Hammacher Schlemmer. Which says right on the cover, guaranteeing the best, the only, and the unexpected for 174 years.
Wow.
America's longest running catalog. It says it right on the cover.
There you go. There you go. So that's in the game of catalogs. That's who came out on top.
And if we think about it, they didn't try to do too much too fast. They figured out what they were good at and they stuck with it. I mean,
Kudos to them. It's like a life lesson for all of us,
It kind of is a life lesson to just be yourself.
I want like an embroidered wall hanging that says Hammaker Schlemmer. Just be yourself. Yeah, because it's anyway, I mean, such is the secret in life and in business, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. This was so fun. This is gonna be such a mega
delight
episode
for me. I just loved it.
Yeah, it's so fun. All right, well, thank you so much, Jess. Let's take a moment to thank some of the incredible small businesses who keep Clotheshorse going via their generous Patreon support. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycle clothing using only reclaimed vintage or thrifted materials from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Shift Clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the Party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room. All while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Gabriella Antonis is a visual artist and an ethical trade fashion designer. But Gabriella is also a radical feminist micro-business. She's the one-woman band trying to help you understand why slow fashion is what the earth needs. The one-woman band to help you build your own brand. She can take your fashion line from just a concept and do your sketches, pattern making, grading, sourcing, cutting, and sewing. The second option is for those who aren't trying to start a business and who just want ethical garments. Gabriella Antonis will create custom made-to-measure garments just for you. Her goal is to help one person of any size at a time, including beyond size 40. To inquire about this serendipitous intersectional offering of either concept, DM her on Instagram to book a consultation. Please follow her on Instagram and Twitter at Gabriella Antonis. And that's Gabriella with one L. Gotta get that spelling right. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpagelifeandstyle. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace, located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. High Energy Vintage is a fun and funky vintage shop located in Somerville, Massachusetts, just a few minutes away from downtown Boston. They offer a highly curated selection of bright and colorful clothing and accessories from the 1940s to the 1990s for people of all genders. Husband and wife duo Wiley and Jessamy handpick each piece for quality and style, with a focus on pieces that transcend trends and will find a home in your closet for many years to come. In addition to clothing, the shop also features a large selection of vintage vinyl and old school video games. Find them on Instagram at High Energy Vintage, online at highenergyvintage.com, and at markets in and around Boston. Vagabond Vintage DTLV is a vintage clothing, accessories, and decor reselling business based in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. Not only do we sell in Las Vegas, but we're also located throughout resale markets in San Francisco, as well as at a curated boutique called Lux and Ivy, located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jessica, the founder and owner of Vagabond Vintage DTLV, recently opened the first IRL location located in the Arts District of downtown Las Vegas on August 5th. The shop has a strong emphasis on 60s and 70s garments, single-stitch tees, and dreamy loungewear. Follow them on Instagram at Vagabond Vintage DTLV and keep an eye out for their website coming fall of 2022. Thank you again to Jess for spending many hours talking about catalogs with me. It was such a delight that we are already working on another episode together, which I'm planning to be the last episode of 2022. It'll be about toy trends and how they connect to advertising, cartoons, and their uncomfortable relationship with the psyches of children. It's really interesting. We went down a deep rabbit hole planning for this one. In the meantime, you can find Jess on Instagram as at Jess in Space, that's with one S, and also on TikTok, where she creates all kinds of amazing videos as Jess in Space. Yes, still one S. And of course, all of that will be in the show notes. I thought I would end this episode with the story of one more catalog. And this part of the episode, this coverage of this specific catalog, is dedicated to Miss Susan Massey. We're going to talk about the story of Swiss Colony. Swiss Colony is, according to the Swiss Colony website, America's #1 food gifts catalog. And you know what? I do not question that. I believe that. I have so many memories of this catalog arriving at our house around October every year, filled with cheese baskets, cookies, festive torts, tins of sugar-free candy, even bigger tins of popcorn, all very festive, right? Petite four decorated with little snowmen. I picture them. I've had them so many times. Swiss Colony had all of the food you were supposed to gift to your loved ones, specifically around the holidays. I love a food gift to this day. And who is really ever truly angry about some festive troubles? The worst thing that happens is you say, oh, I don't eat chocolate, or this doesn't fit into my diet, and you pass it on to someone else, right? Because it's still a great regift. My mom and grandma ordered religiously from Swiss Colony. Like, it is such a part of my childhood memories. And they would even send me Swiss Colony as an adult, specifically those petite fours with the snowman. Oh, so good. To me, as a child, Swiss Colony was the most sophisticated catalog for the true gourmands, for people who probably owned yachts and spent the holidays skiing in the Alps. It was for people who had been to Europe, because wasn't Swiss Colony, Swiss, and therefore European, and therefore fancy? Well, maybe not. It turns out that Swiss Colony began in 1926 in neither Geneva nor Zurich, nor even a bucolic Alpine village, but instead in Monroe, Wisconsin, in the United States of America. Apparently, not surprising to me, Monroe had both a strong concentration of Swiss immigrants and a history of making a lot of cheese. Ray Kubley was a senior at the University of Wisconsin that year. Once again, it was 1926. And one of his school projects was considering the pros and cons of creating a business selling Wisconsin cheese via mail order. Now, it was no coincidence that Ray had cheese on his mind because, according to the Swiss Colony website, Ray's hometown was the, quote, unofficial cheese capital of the biggest cheese-producing state in the nation. Cheese was pretty much in his blood, which is a gross mental picture for sure, but, you know, he's from cheese country. Well, after he graduated, Ray just could not stop thinking about this cheese mail order business. So he decided to go for it. And per Swiss Colony legend, quote, he mailed out handbills, which he himself designed and stamped, that advertised cuts of Wisconsin-made bulk cheeses for the upcoming holidays. As orders came in, he cut the huge wheels of cheese into pieces by hand, then wrapped and shipped them. In his first year of business, he sold all 50 packages of cheese that he had prepared. Okay, well, by 1941, 15 years later, Swiss Colony had 100 seasonal employees because, the focus was on holiday food gifting. And customers included Eleanor Roosevelt, Jimmy Stewart, Ginger Rogers, Ronald Reagan, and many other celebrities who loved giving cheese as a gift. Just a few years later, the business had grown so much that the railroad had to send an extra boxcar to Monroe every week in December just to transport all of those holiday cheese orders. A boxcar is huge. I can't even imagine how many pounds of cheese are in a boxcar, to be honest. It's much, much cheese. Over time, Swiss Colony added sausage, bakery products, and candies to its product offering. These included fruitcake, torte, and of course, those petite fours. They were making so many seasonally, adorably, festively decorated baked goods that, according to their website, the Swiss Colony has the largest hand-decorating bakery in America. This business is growing a lot. We've got celebrities, we've got baked goods, we've got hand decorating. From 1926 to 1961, as Swiss Colony grew and grew, Ray Kubli was just doing it, are you ready for this, as a side hustle. In fact, this entire time, he held on to his day job at Borden, which was a dairy company, still is around, where he worked his way up to vice president. So for 35 years, he worked two jobs. It's wild to me. Like a lot of catalogs, Swiss Colony tried to make the move to retail stores in the 60s and 70s, operating more than 225 locations. But in the 1980s, the company decided to move away from that plan, closing these stores due to, an economic downturn and the high rents in malls. And honestly, I think that Swiss Colony made a really smart decision there, because I do wonder if they had tried to force the issue, so to speak, and keep those stores open, if the company would still be around now. As of today, Swiss Colony is still family-owned, but now it is called Colony Brands, Inc. It employs more than 4,500 people, with about half of them being seasonal employees strictly for the rush of holiday food gifts. In 2008, Colony Brands purchased the assets of a bankrupt catalog retailer called Direct Marketing Service, what a scintillating name. And by purchasing this, they acquired more catalog brands, including Montgomery Ward, Charles Keith, which was a home decor brand that seems to be defunct, and Home Visions, also seems to be RIP. And most importantly, as we've learned in this episode, they acquired all of those addresses for potential customers. That's the name of the game in the catalog business. Gotta have those mailing addresses. Colony Brands also acquired many other catalogs over the years, including Wisconsin Cheeseman, which I didn't look up, but I speculate is a cheese catalog. Midnight Velvet, which sounds like a great album name. It actually sells clothing and home goods. Ginny's, another home goods and gifts catalog. 7th Avenue, yet another clothing and home decor gift catalog. They consider this their flagship catalog, even bigger than Swiss Colony. And all of these catalogs are known for offering financing on all of their orders. That includes the food from Swiss Colony. It's sort of like layaway, but with interest. There's a payment plan. And I know for certain that this is how my family got into shopping from them and why they liked shopping from them. Once you buy from one of these catalogs, you start receiving them all. And the financing is pretty hard to resist, I think, for a lot of people. And so, yeah, the company still family owned, still going strong, kind of unusual in comparison to all the other catalogs we've talked about, right? But here's the twist that you didn't see coming. Colony Brands also maintains a controlling interest in SC Aviation, Inc. The SC is for Swiss Colony. It's a provider of charter aircraft. It all began in 1946 when the company bought a 2-passenger single-engine Cessna 140. This was used to transport executives and, when necessary, products and orders. And soon they added a 5-seat Cessna to the mix because they were getting so much use out of the other airplane. And over the years, as they added and upgraded their planes, they realized that this fleet was another source of revenue for the company, as other businesses were willing to pay for use of these planes to transport their own executives and products and orders. SC Aviation offers charter flights all over the Midwest via private jet. You can go to their website right now and look into booking one. Kind of a crazy add-on to all of this cheese and baked goods, right? And those snowman petit fours. Anyway, that's all I have for this Catalogapalooza, but perhaps we'll revisit this more next year because I asked you all this week on Instagram to tell me some of your favorite catalogs from childhood, and you gave me quite a long list that I will be thinking about, so perhaps we'll do another part next year. But I have to go make dinner now. It's going to be lasagna with zucchini instead of noodles. It's very dreary here in Austin today. It's been dreary in Austin for quite a while. And I feel like some nice lasagna will make us all feel a lot better while we watch White Lotus. So I'm going to call this the end of this episode and say thanks for listening to another episode of Clotheshorse. Written, researched, edited, hosted, all the things by me, Amanda Lee McCarty. If you like what you're hearing, please leave a rating, and maybe even, if you're feeling extra this week, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. But most importantly, tell your friends, because that's how real change happens, right? Getting more and more people involved. If you'd like to support my work financially, you can find out more at patreon.com/clothehorsepodcast. And thanks, as always, to my other half, Justin Travis White, for our music and audio support. I will see you all next week. Bye.